Great Sunday morning, everybody, and welcome to a September 21st edition of Flashpoint. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Let's set the lineup for you this morning. We've assembled our insiders to talk about the budget standoff in Lansing, some interesting tactics in the Detroit mayor's race, and much more. Journalists Emily Lawler, Orlando Bailey, and Chad Livengood are all here, plus MSU economist Charles Ballard will break down what a shutdown would do to Michigan's already shaky economy. And we're going to dive into the mailbag this week, and there were some heated comments about some of our recent topics. So let's roll. As we stand here, just 10 days now until the constitutionally mandated date to have a budget in place, lawmakers can't even agree on who should be doing the negotiating. Republican Speaker of the House Matt Hall has butted heads with Democratic Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks and is flatly saying he'd rather hammer out a deal with Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Well, here's what she said about that this week.
My budget team will continue to participate in all the conversations, but putting up the votes and actually passing the budget is the legislature's responsibility.
Let us not forget the recent GOP House budget passed is a full $6 billion less than the one passed by the Senate Dems. So there is some negotiating to be done and not much time to do it. Let's discuss that and more with our insiders right now on Flashpoint. Joining us at the table this morning, Chad Livengood from the Detroit News. Orlando Bailey is the executive director at Outlier Media, and Emily Lawler from the Detroit Free Press is here. Guys, so good to see you. Thanks for being here. Chad, let's start with the budget. What's holding this up? I know that's kind of a general question, but what's the holdup here?
Well, months ago, Governor Whitmer wanted to link a budget deal with a road funding deal, a long-term plan, try to get to this sort of almost mythical number of $3 billion more per year. And she put out some proposals in February, but I don't think we've even heard her really articulate those proposals in a long, long time. That essentially she wants to have a couple different taxes that don't hit road users.
And she could have jumped back into it this week. She had an opportunity, but still said, no, legislators, you got to do this.
Yeah, she's still trying to get the legislature to come up with something, but no one wants to really tackle this head on. House Republicans came up with, okay, Governor, we'll get you a budget that links to it, and they came up with $3 billion of cuts. Of course, Senate Democrats said no way, no how, and the governor is backing her fellow Democrats, but no one really is actually coming up with a plan. Harken back to 2019, we had a similar showdown like this, where Governor Whitmer was pushing for that 45% per gallon gas tax increase. She backed off within the last week, unlinked the the road funding deal to roads, and we got a budget signed into law right on the deadline on September 30th. The governor then turned around and borrowed $3.5 billion, and we got all the road construction we've had the last 4 years. But nonetheless, I mean, this is where we're headed to sort of a very much a deja vu moment in Lansing.
Emily, the big difference is Matt Hall's around this time as Speaker, and sometimes it feels, am I wrong when I assume it's almost like he wants to break the wheel here? He's going to get his budget, even though he's dealing with a Democratic Senate, Democratic governor.
Well, I think certainly he's had a lot of power in this triad. So I think certainly he's exercised a lot of that. But I think that, ultimately the Senate and governor are two out of the three legs of the stool here. I think they can exercise some power. And I think, frankly, they're a little bit put off by the budget that he introduced, certainly trying to present more of a united front. The Senate's got their own budget. But I have a
way far apart.
Way far apart.
$6 billion apart?
Way far apart. Way far apart. And I also I think that we're sort of in a territory here where we're going to be looking at a continuation budget and have to look at a roads plan further down the road.
So you don't think there will be a shutdown? You think they'll just pass a continuation?
That's my bold prediction to the day.
Interesting. Orlando, what do you think? Because I think a lot of people are thinking here that the shutdown is imminent. It's just a matter of how long it might last.
Yeah, I think folks especially in Detroit communities, need a government that works, right? And with the shutdown looming, nobody is excited about it. There are many departments, there are many things that are at threat with a shutdown looming, including schools and school lunch, the Department of Health and Human Services and the services that they deliver. Detroiters in particular want a government to figure this out and a government to stay open.
Yeah, and the Michigan School Meals Program, very important to districts like Detroit.
Yeah.
Let me ask about something that happened this week. Chad, I'll start with you. J.D. Vance in Howell this week and offered the governor to send in troops to Detroit. What do you think the likelihood is? And I'll ask everybody how you think this could be received if it actually happens.
Well, Governor Whitmer didn't say anything. It was complete crickets about it. But it's just not like something she's asking for. Mayor Mike Duggan has said we don't need this. I mean, Duggan has tried to go out of his way to say nice things about Trump's U.S. attorney in Detroit and say, hey, he's doing a good job and he's cracking down on some of this crime and whatnot, and just say we got things under control, but also rolling out the data. And the data very clearly shows we are at a 60-year low in homicides, and violent crime is the lowest it's been in decades, and not nearly the crisis that we have experienced as a city in past years. And so still not acceptable by anybody's means and definition, but trying to basically pour some cold water on the administration's hunt for the next city.
And they're doing it with stats in Orlando. They're talking about possibly going to Memphis, which they cite as the most violent crime in 2024. But Detroit did have the most violent crime rate, second most, I should say, behind Memphis. How would this be received if it started to get closer?
I wonder what it would have been like if that speech was given in front of a Detroit audience, right? Yeah. And so I'm thinking about all of the levers that have been pulled within the last couple of years around community violence intervention, community policing. The chief walks the block every Wednesday. How that might be received in Detroit. I don't think it would be received in Detroit. Some of the earliest memories that my mother talks about is during the 1967 rebellion when tanks were riding up and down the streets of Detroit. It's not a fond memory, and I think a lot of Detroiters remember that. A lot of Detroiters are in support of CVI and the community partnership with the police. And so I don't think it's a go for Detroiters.
And Emily, I think the language was key too. It was an offer, whereas like Chicago, we're going in. There's a difference there.
Yeah, and I think that with Gretchen Whitmer cultivating a relationship with the White House, this is exactly the kind of thing she's got to be hoping to prevent, right? That relationship has already been leveraged a little bit with the Selfridge achievement, but you'd have to think that certainly one of her main goals in building that relationship with the administration is to prevent something exactly like this.
It appears, let me switch gears to another topic. It appears we're going to get at least one debate in the Detroit mayoral race. But behind the scenes, many outlets have been frustrated, lamented a little bit that they've had difficulty getting these two candidates in a joint forum or debate style setting. Orlando, what do you make of that? Is this just plain strategy? But it feels like it's happening on both sides.
I feel like it's a game of chicken, right? And I feel like, the campaigns are trying to do what's best for the campaign and not for the city of Detroit and this community. I happen to believe that the candidates should have a debate in the city of Detroit proper, in front of Detroit.
Many of them, more than one.
Yeah, and right now, we don't have anything like that on the schedule, and I think that's a disgrace.
Emily?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. Certainly there's some political strategy involved here when candidates are making these decisions about appearances. But I also think there's a little bit more time, more room for movement. Things could shake out differently than what we're seeing today.
And Chet, I that's kind of what I thought along the way. Like if Sheffield looks at the numbers here versus Kinloch, she could do the quote-unquote Biden in the basement for a couple months if she really wanted to.
This is her race to lose. And this also follows a trend we've seen with other front runners in other races in recent years. The last three elections for governor, we had one debate in each of them. The last, I believe, 3 Senate races, we also had one debate or barely debate sometimes. The front runners avoid these things like the plague. They don't want to do anything that's going to possibly spoil their momentum. momentum, and voters are by the last weekend in September, Detroiters will start getting absentee ballots,
September 25th.
and voting will begin in earnest. So if you're already starting to bank a bunch of early votes, stepping out on a debate stage in mid-October runs a lot of risk.
Last topic, let me talk about what we've seen in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder in a way where WDIV doesn't get taken off the air for some reason. I'm going to start with a quote from Donald Trump in 2020, which was talking about cancel culture, which said, "To make decent Americans live in fear of being fired, expelled, shamed, humiliated, and driven from society as we know it." Of course, that was when he and others were being tossed off social media and censored in a way, and now we're seeing people targeted for saying things about Charlie Kirk in the wake of his death, and now Jimmy Kimmel yanked off the air by ABC for inferring, incorrectly I might add, that the shooter was a member of MAGA. Emily, let me start with you and leave this as open-ended as you want to answer this, but are you worried about free speech at this moment?
You know, I think there's been kind of a shift to talking about cancel culture, kind of that's been a buzzword among liberal groups, to, as my colleagues at USA Today reported recently, consequence culture. And there is some sort of, you know, I think some threat that there's some implicit things that could happen if people are speaking out about this. We saw J.D. Vance, for example, calling on people to call their employers if they see things that are inflammatory. So I think that's a little bit of a new angle, but free speech is just such a deeply held American value on all sides of the aisle.
By Charlie Kirk himself, we should point out.
By Charlie Kirk himself, that I think that people are also kind of galvanizing their interest in free speech at this moment.
I hate to do it. I have less than a minute for each of you to drop a thought here. Orlando?
You know, I would say that the tenets of our Constitution, including free speech, have always been fragile. And what we're seeing right now feels unprecedented. I've not seen in my lifetime a chair of the FCC threaten to take broadcast licenses. So more to come. I'm waiting.
And this could have been a business decision, but when the FCC said that we could do it the easy way or hard way, Chad, that kind of made it a little dicey.
I mean, this device right here is just as powerful as any broadcaster now. And why do we still have a Federal Communications Commission to begin with? Is, I think, a question that is open for debate that Congress really ought to be thinking about in this day and age. This was built for a different society 70 years ago that doesn't exist anymore.
Gang, thanks so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate it. We've tried to cover a lot of ground here. More Flashpoint next.
Wow.
Back here on Flashpoint, and Dr. Charles Ballard has a PhD in economics and taught at Michigan State for more than 40 years. And after 5 books, well, he's long been considered one of the best with his finger on the pulse of the Michigan economy. Charlie, good morning. It's great to have you alongside. Is that an accurate introduction?
That's a pretty good introduction. Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm glad you could have me on the program.
Absolutely. So you've seen state shutdowns before as we focus on the budget talks right now. How would one affect Michigan's economy right now?
Well, we had a couple of budget shutdowns back in the Granholm administration, but they didn't last for very long. And so they created a lot of noise, but didn't really do a whole lot of damage to the economy.
If you see this one,
I hope we don't have.
I was going to say, if this goes like a week or more, are we in some trouble here?
Well, the longer it goes, the more trouble it causes. And that's true for the state. It's also true for the federal level. And of course, there's danger that we would have a federal government shutdown. If these things can be resolved quickly, they don't do a whole lot of immediate damage. I would say that the very fact that we're talking about the possibility of a shutdown indicates that our government is a little bit dysfunctional. And that is not a good signal to the rest of the country or the rest of the world. If you're an investor, do you want to invest in a place that has where the government actors can't reach agreement? That's a problem.
That's interesting. And on this program, I've talked many times citing manufacturing job losses. I believe it's 28,000 over the last 6 years. And we've held the nation's second worst unemployment rate for, I believe, 14 months now. Overall, is Michigan's economy strong enough to endure a setback like this?
Sure. Well, I guess it depends upon what you say is endure. We will keep marching on. and most people in Michigan will only be affected a little bit. But it will not be good for the long term. There's just no question about that. And when you say, will we endure? How are we doing? Well, there's just a long-term challenge. Our economy prospered fabulously in the middle of the 20th century with manufacturing, especially the auto sector, but that has been in decline for a long time. So that last year we were 39th among the 50 states in terms of per capita income, which is not that great. And we have more than 1 million Michiganders who are below the official poverty line. Thus, anybody who's below the poverty line, they're not doing very well. So we could do, I believe we could do a lot better, and a government shutdown will not help us to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if people realize that that's been the case, that Michigan's economy has struggled to that effect. In your opinion, what would be the keys to re-energizing the state once a budget does get in place?
Well, I certainly hope that the budget preserves our education. Because that's really the number one thing. If we want to have a prosperous economy for the long term, we have to have a highly educated and trained and skilled population. And we have lagged behind the national average in many indicators of educational attainment for a very long time. So I would put dollars into education, although I wouldn't just throw dollars. I would demand accountability from the schools that we really are getting our money's worth for the dollars that we spend.
Yeah, and that is actually part of this budget negotiation. We've heard some candidates for governor talk about actually having accountability when it comes to that sort of thing. But
right.
Yeah, and we've also cited numbers like that with the education numbers have been lagging with kids. You're seeing that if we can turn that around and get education and test scores from kids back up, that's going to have a direct effect on the economy.
Yes, that is exactly true. Now, I would say, remember, if we improve the education for some child who's now in second grade, that child isn't going to be in the workforce for 10, 15 years, depending upon how far they go. So this is, when I talk about education, I'm not talking about fixing it by next week. Yeah. I'm talking about taking a long-term structural problem and applying long-term structural solutions to that problem.
No easy, quick fixes for sure. Well, Dr. Charles Ballard, always great to see you and talk to you. Thanks so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Great to see you again, Jason. Thanks.
You too, Charlie Ballard. Coming right back with more Flashpoint right after this. All right, let's get to the mailbag this week. We got a ton of response from last week's discussion with Nolan Finley, Stephen Henderson, Guy Gordon, and Devin Scillian on political discourse in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think we need to have more of those kinds of discussions if we ever hope to unite this country instead of continually finding ways to divide us. More finding solutions than divisions. I would love to see more of this group. That's from Carol. Marcia writes, I want to commend Stephen Henderson for making the point when all other commentators I heard that day were blaming social media and the internet for political violence, that Charlie Kirk made his reputation, fame, and fortune on that very media. I'm not suggesting that social media and the internet did not have a major role, but it's an incomplete discussion if we don't point out that Charlie Kirk would not be the major social media figure he was without social media and the internet. Again, that's from Marcia. Counterpoint here from an unnamed click-on commenter. Disgusting take from Stephen Henderson. This man tacitly excused the assassination of Charlie Kirk. For example, let's remember what Kirk said. He was a polemicist, etc. It does not matter what Kirk said. You do not murder people because of their speech. Plain and simple. Yet this man put an asterisk on Kirk's murder. Yeah, but unacceptable and irresponsible. Worst of all, none of today's panelists pushed back. Shame on you all. Well, maybe we didn't push back because you left out the key part, which was what Henderson said, and I'm quoting here, this has nothing to do with the wrongness of what happened to him. That was part of his answer there. Sarah noticed the panel assembled only had older men and one minority, being an African-American male. Why not a woman and someone who's in their 20s or 30s? I think the discussion would be much richer with better representation of our community than with people other than what was there. Sarah, trust me when I say we discussed that very thing, and we always strive for a diverse group every single week. It was a treat to see some familiar faces responding evenly and calmly to last week's event. Let's all hope for a peaceful week in the country and a productive week in the state. Well, that's a good call, Gracie, because when it came to our discussion on the state budget standoff, here's what Wes writes. Your two recent Flashpoint guests, Mark Tisdall and Ranjiv Puri from the Michigan House, made drastically different claims about the state budget proposals, especially regarding funding of police and schools. When claims on your program are this irreconcilable, Local 4 journalists have more work to do. Fact-checking is the core of journalism. Next Sunday, start Flashpoint with a fact-check recap of your guests' claims and make fact-checking of guests a regular feature of Flashpoint. Well, I cannot argue with that rationale, Wes, so in honor of your email, I did do a little checking on a few of those facts. Mr. Puri did, in fact, accuse Republicans of defunding the state police, and Mr. Tisdall said no state troopers will be taken off the streets. The House Republican budget does cut $66 million from MSP, and it eliminates 39 jobs, but they're in the Professional Development Bureau. So on that, technically both of them are right. On schools, Mr. Puri said Republicans want to get rid of free meals for kids, while Mr. Tisdall said federal funding is there for them. True, federal funding is there, but not nearly as much, and families would have to meet income requirements to qualify for it, while the Michigan School Meals Program would fund it entirely for all kids. Republicans want to give schools more money, but they want them to spend it any way they want. Now, when we had on Representatives Debbie Dingell and Tim Walberg recently, we posted their answers to the question, is what's happening in Gaza genocide? Ms. Dingell stopped just short of saying yes, it is, while Mr. Walberg said it was Hamas that was committing the genocide. We got 464 comments on that post, and here are just a few. End the occupation, stop the massacres, and please stop blaming the victim. The talking points are useless. It's genocide. Where are the Palestinians supposed to go? Why kill people who are picking up food? There are no starving children. Hamas is killing their own. This war will only end once Hamas loves their own people more than they hate Israel. If Walberg cared about the full story, he'd say something about the IDF murdering journalists in Gaza and refusing to let outside journalists in. I should point out, this week, independent experts commissioned by the UN Human Rights Council concluded Israel is committing genocide in Gaza and called on the international community to end it. Emails always welcome. Flashpoint at clickondetroit.com is where you send them. That is our show this Sunday morning, everybody. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.